Morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to make sure I was on the right one.
Oh, no problem. No, I was just getting it. I didn't realize people were locked out, so I just getting started. So, and just so I make sure I say it correctly, is it Corinne, or is that correct pronunciation?
Corinne. Okay. Yeah, I do Zoom meetings like all day, most days. So I wanted to make sure I was in the right one.
I'm going to start letting other people in. I see. And good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining us. We have everyone on mute for this meeting. We want to use the meeting format so that we can have some conversations. So we'll do that portion after we get through the panel, but up until that point, we're going to leave everyone on mute. And again, good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a few moments. We'll keep everyone on mute. We'll bring in our panelists in just a few minutes. We'll have a conversation with our panel, and then we'll open it up. Again, good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of moments once we have everyone into the room. Good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We want to welcome everyone to Councils and Conversations. Today, we're talking about mental health awareness during COVID, back to work with courage, compassion, and determination. We have a little bit different format for you. Last month, we did our first, what was our morning mingle as a Councils and Conversation. We did it in the webinar format. So today we wanted to try setting that up as a meeting just to allow for a little bit more conversation. So we have everyone on mute. Ask that you stay on mute during the panel conversation that we're going to have in just a couple of minutes. And then once we wrap up the conversation, we'll open it up to questions and to conversation as well. We'll see how it goes. I think we'll probably try to call on people. If you can either raise your hand or put something in the chat, or maybe wave on the screen. I'll call on you and then unmute you, just so that we don't get lots of people talking over each other. But we'll try to make this work, and so it should be a fun way to continue on with what really is the core of the Councils and Conversations. It's having great presenters and speakers, but then also having the opportunity to network and talk with the other participants. I do, as always, want to thank all of our investors. We have 3 levels of investors: our premier, key, and principal investors, who allow us to do all of the programming that we're able to put on throughout the course of the year, and especially during a time like this. I'll be moderating our panel, and we'll get that underway in just a moment. Today, we do have a combination of a couple of our councils here at the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce: the HR Resource Council, presented by Carmody, Torrance, Sandeck, and Hennessy, as well as our Nonprofit Resource Council, presented by Mosaic. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. Peter Shore is the CEO with Retreat Behavioral. Daniel Fitzmaurice is the Executive Director with the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. And Corinne Seville is a clinical psychologist and program director with Cornell Scott Hill Health Center and their adult outpatient behavioral health. I'm going to first, let me welcome all 3 of our panelists and appreciate taking part in this program today. Peter, let me start with you, and I'll have each of our panelists just speak for a couple of minutes with some of the issues that they're seeing. Peter, thanks for joining us, and thank you for becoming a part of the chamber as well. Let me make sure I can unmute Peter there. There you go, Peter. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Thank you, and good morning,
Great,
everyone.
thank you.
Our pleasure.
Peter, why don't you just start us off with what are some of the issues that you are seeing? And I should mention, you're a national organization, so you're here in Connecticut, but operating in several states, and so have a really good depth and coverage of some of the issues that folks are dealing with from a mental health standpoint.
Well, on a personal level, with our facilities, and like you say, Garrett, our inpatient hospitals are in 3 different states, and we have outpatients scattered throughout those states. Yeah, our biggest challenge is obviously, because we have to stay open during this, is because we treat very sick people, is that how do we keep our patients and our staff safe through all this? It's a challenge because the patients, we do assessments, and before they come in, there's a 3-level assessment process. And we've been very successful with that. But, you got to understand, staff is going home and out in the public. And, we have to make sure that, they're safe and they're doing the right things. And when they come back, we take everyone's temperature when they come in, whether or not it's effective or not. It's something that we need to do. A lot of people that are non-essential staff that are working from home are asking all the time when they could come back and when they could come back. And what we're doing is trying to feed off of the state's protocols on what they're saying, what we should do, and what's open, and how we're going to proceed with that. Our outpatient facilities switched over very quickly to telemedicine, so that's been working very well, but that's not a long-term fix. So we're going to have to bring people back to outpatient facilities too. And so we have to, there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of fear. People are scared, they don't understand what's going on because there's a lot of mixed information going out there. So we have to make intelligent decisions and make sure that our staff and our patients are safe at all times.
Great, thank you, Peter. And we'll come back to you as we get into the questions. Now I'm going to turn to Corinne Seville with Cornell Scott Hill Health Center. And Corinne, thanks for joining us. What are some of the issues that you're seeing, especially that people are dealing with from a mental health standpoint?
Primarily, I think, what our population is experiencing is what everybody in the global population is experiencing, which is a lot of increased anxiety, increased depression because of the uncertainty of what the future holds. Initially, everybody was primarily focused on their basic needs being met. There was a lot of concern about, am I going to have food? Am I going to have shelter? Am I going to have a way to pay my bills and to keep my electricity and to keep, the house where I'm living or the apartment where I'm staying? Am I going to be able to meet my basic needs? And so that experience significantly impacted our population, who in particular maybe already had very limited resources. They were very marginalized. And had very, very limited resources as it was. So this was incredibly destabilizing for them. And for the staff, they had their own fears. And so it was very difficult, like Peter's agency, we immediately switched to telemedicine, and we have remained open because we recognize that there are a lot of clients who maybe don't even have access to telephones, don't have access to video. And so we've remained open in order to have them have access to care. But with that comes a lot of fear as well, a lot of uncertainty for the staff as to who's coming in, a lot of fear on behalf of the clients as to, do I want to, take the risk of going into an agency, going on site? And we also have implemented a lot of, we have fever checks, we have symptom checks before everybody comes in. We have personal protective equipment. So all the staff, all of the clinicians, many of whom are working remotely. So we have a rotating schedule. Some work on site, one day a week, and then work at a remote office or at home the other days of the week. But when they're on site, they're wearing masks and gloves, and we're sanitizing. But even with that, there's so much uncertainty that people are still very scared. And I think that what's difficult is when you have clients who are very scared and looking for reassurance, but then you also have staff who are very scared. They're looking for their own reassurance. And, a lot of what we do is we try and challenge irrational fears and irrational beliefs. But in this case, the fears aren't irrational. They're not irrational beliefs. There is a lot of misinformation out there. We don't know what is true and what isn't true, and we don't know what the future holds. And so it's really challenging to reassure our clients and to support them through this, when the staff have their own fears. So we've been doing a lot of support for the staff, and the primary way to kind of battle this is to, number one, focus on what we have control over, which is really not a whole lot, but focus on what we have control over and try to do whatever we can to make sure that we are keeping ourselves safe and that we're keeping our clients safe. And that's what we encourage our clients to do, is to focus, again, what they can really manage, what they really have control over, in order to try and make this very overwhelming situation. And in many ways, it's like a global trauma that we're experiencing. There's a lot of grief for what was, uncertainty about what this new normal, right, is going to look like. And we have to have compassion for ourselves to understand that we don't have the answers and we don't have a lot of control, and that is where we all are, and that's okay.
Great, thank you, Corinne. We'll get back to you. I want to bring in Daniel Fitzmaurice. And Dan, so many people in times of struggle turn to the arts community for peace, serenity, whether it's entertainment, looking at art. Those are things you just really can't even do right now. So interested to hear your take on what you've been seeing over the last several months.
Yeah, I think that, well, I think there's there's both sides of that coin, Garrett. On one hand, like, the arts have been more essential than ever to people on a personal basis, which I think is really important to remember. So, and whether that's like making sourdough or getting back to the drawing that you used to do, or even just like what our kids are doing while they're learning from home, which in my house tends to be far more creative than what they'd be doing at school. So no, I think the arts have found sort of an essential hook at this time. And sometimes it is just for blowing off steam. And sometimes it is, for making joy or trying to create connection across the digital chasm that we're living in. I also think that, I mean, it's particularly true, and things we're seeing and kind of talking about and watching in our office and in our ecosystem is also the role of the arts during this, to sort of explain this moment, right? And to understand, I think in particular, the things that haven't shifted, right? A lot of things have shifted and there's a lot of things that haven't, right? Like people who were food insecure are even more food insecure now. And what's the role of, you know, creativity in sort of like amplifying that, that lack of shift? You know, I can't help but this morning just think like, you know, people of color are being murdered, not just by COVID-19, but by white men continually. And how does the arts frame into that story? That hasn't shifted because of COVID-19. It's actually just become more apparent to more people. So I don't know. I mean, our office, just to speak to what we're doing, you know, we've always had a very kind of flexible working environment. A lot of our staff have kids or in multiple different passion places, right? They're artists themselves, or they're also working. You know, so we shifted right away to doing a lot of COVID delivery, sort of COVID support through everything that we're doing. But I think the thing that I wanted to emphasize is it's been really important to us to really focus on two things, which is our value proposition and a new term I'm using, but I found out called our people proposition, right? So we've known like what our strategy was, and this has been a real opportunity to jump deeper into that. So for example, like we launched the Creative Sector Relief Fund, which has given $130,000 away to low-income creatives, because that's something we've been yearning to do. We just didn't know how and when we would do that. How would we raise that money? How would we distribute it? It just felt urgent to do. But projects like that for us have really motivated the staff, right? They've motivated our board, they've motivated our community more broadly. And I think that's the people proposition, basically. There's a lot more I think we could be doing and that I could be doing. And I just have to admit before I pass it back to you, Garrett, like it's hard, like it's really, really hard to run an institution during this time. I keep using, another term I'm using is really, it's not normal. Like nothing about this is normal. There will be no new normal, but rather there will be a next normal. And I do think that our institutions will be judged by our constituents, by our staffs, by our communities on how we are coping during this time. And then that's going to translate to how we're doing in the next normal.
Thanks, Dan. And we'll start with a few questions. And if people have questions, if they want to raise a comment, you can raise your hand and then I'll come around and unmute you. And while we get into that mode, Peter, let me turn back to you and ask you this question. You know, one of the things we've all been dealing with is that we're in a health crisis and then now an economic crisis, but those both play on people's mental state as well. Two very different situations, obviously very connected here, but through your work, do you guys see a lot of people dealing with both? Are they different types of situations with how people react to them?
Well, in our world, in addiction, a lot of people run into economic problems because of their addiction. This is just, you know, exacerbated the whole situation now where everybody's dealing with that, and people have to learn some skills how to do that. So we see a lot of it. We see a lot of people who are coming in now that wouldn't have come in before because of what's going on our mental health side. You know, we treat both mental health patients and substance use disorder patients. So we've seen a big spike in that. So we've tried to accommodate, and our mental health therapists are seeing a lot more of people coming in who are dealing with everyday problems that, you know, are causing extreme anxiety and are causing, you know, people to act out and do things that they wouldn't normally do.
And are you seeing a rise in substance abuse? I think, you know, especially when we first got into this, one of the businesses that was doing well was definitely package stores, liquor stores. Has there been a corresponding rise in substance abuse? There has. There definitely has been. The funny part of it is, though, on the opiate side, you're not seeing a big spike in that because, you know, everybody is afraid to be outside and actually
selling drugs. So that has seen something kind of stabilize out a little, but on the alcohol side, it's exploded.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing across the board, across all of our sites. Definitely an increase in the frequency of relapse. But Peter, the same, we're not seeing so much in terms of opiate, but alcohol use is significantly increased.
And Corinne, what would you say to employers? What should they be on the lookout for, especially as they're not in the same place now in most circumstances with their employees? Many times they're working virtually remote. How do they take the mental health check of their employees and keep an eye out for that?
Well, I think it always boils down to communication. I think that, we've had to adapt very quickly. And so at first it was a bit jarring. And technology, as advanced as it was, it still had more work to do, but I think that it's getting better. So, take advantage of Zoom, take advantage of these platforms, have, I have a daily check-in with all of my clinicians, and it's just sometimes it's just a 10-15-minute meeting, but you can see everybody. So we all have video. We made sure that everybody had the capability to have video. Because again, conversation is really important, but so much conversation happens non-verbally. So if you're only hearing what somebody is saying and you're not seeing them, you're missing, at least half of the conversation that's going on. So having that kind of visual check-in with your staff, if you can't do it every day, at least do it, every week, and then individual check-ins as well, just to make sure that everybody is doing okay. I think that, when the shift happened and everything changed so radically, people just really, I think that a lot of our businesses and a lot of our agencies are really staffed with really good people who really want to help. And they're the type of people that just roll up their sleeves and they just get in there. And I think that that's a survival way. That's the way that you survive, and that's the way that you get through it. But eventually that wears you down, and you need to step back and maybe, let your sleeves down a little bit and check in with each other and just make sure that, your staff's needs are being met, that their needs are being met as well. Providing, teletherapy remotely or doing any remote work is very intense. I'm sure you've all experienced this. It's a very condensed experience. It's very intense. When you're in the office every day, the day is full of distractions, and those distractions give you a break. And so you go to the restroom and you go to get something to eat and you stop by someone's office and you have a chat, and, all of these things help relieve stress. They help you commiserate with your colleagues. They help you process and debrief a lot of experiences. And we've lost that because now we have meetings, we're in there, there's not conversation before the meeting just starts, you're in the meeting's over. And so all of that kind of the filler that happens before and after these meetings is really valuable. And we've had to sacrifice that because of the modality in which we're doing our business now. So try and create opportunities for that to still happen. Try and create opportunities to have maybe unstructured conversation, because that's really where you get to connect and really see where people are and understand, how they are coping with the situation.
Dan, I think of the arts community, and there was so much immediate economic impact, theaters closing, live performances can't take place. Even now, as we're in the reopening, those types of large gatherings are later in the process. How is the arts community dealing from that economic side and from a mental health position of having so much impact so quickly with no real end in sight for some of the live entertainment options?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, in this case, it's a mix, right? I mean, if you're a violin teacher, at Neighborhood Music School, you're doing, as you mentioned, Corinne, like you're teaching remotely, you're finding all kinds of ways to connect to your audiences and your students. That does have a ripple effect. And as you go to different types of disciplines, that's what's so sort of challenging about creative work and like the creative career or creative economy is, all the industries are kind of different in their own way. The opportunity space, though, I mean, I think that's, groups that have been really, I don't want to say fighting, I guess fighting through this, have been finding real good ways of using digital, using phone, even using all kinds of opportunities to create connection. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're here to do. So if that's a living room concert, not a concert for 2,000, that's still something. It's also making the arts community much smaller in a way. It's a very global world right now, where there's a bunch of projects happening even, here, we're hosting Make Music Day this year on June 21st. And internationally, there are all these sort of challenges going on, like, and this has been going on for years, but during COVID, it's particularly connective to kind of the global world. And I do think that artists and folks in arts institutions feel some comfort in that solidarity, right? And again, I would also say that a lot of arts organizations are finding connections to the activism that's going on in this community too, right? They're finding ways to work with mutual aid funds or fighting for rent relief, or, they're connecting with what their audiences want or what their audiences are seeking. So ultimately, like, what an arts institution is shifting right in front of our eyes. And I think that's been really, from my perspective, that's very exciting to see. Of course, it comes as, with devastation, but it's going to be, again, in the next normal, it's going to seem very different, I think, with what these arts institutions were up to during this time, because the bigger ones will be closed probably until, 2021.
Thanks, Dan. I just want to reiterate, if anyone wants to jump into the conversation, you can use the reaction icons, and then I'll unmute you and we can get you in. And also anything you just want to share. As people continue to consider things they want to add in there, and you can use the chat as well. I'll open this up to the entire panel. One of the conversations we had yesterday was just about the mask society and the new etiquette of wear a mask, don't wear a mask, and how people navigate that, because it can be very frustrating for some people. Everyone's under a lot of stress, and we've seen instances where people get very upset that someone else is not wearing a mask. People who choose not to wear a mask get upset that they're being asked to. Any comment from our panel just on overall in general? It doesn't have to be about masks, but how we navigate these new etiquettes that are out there.
For me, it's how we have to live our lives now. I mean, it's something that people should get used to. It's something that, people are going to be afraid when this is over with. There'll be something new, and we'll be much more conscious of our health, of how we can be. Is our neighbor going to infect us with something? So it's the people who are angry. And you can understand what they're angry about. They're angry about the lack of information, the lack of real quality information that's telling people what's going on. All we hear is there is a virus out there and people are dying from it. Is there any other information that we can gather? And everyone gets their own information. And then the economic loss that people are experiencing is something that just doesn't go away. I mean, there is. I think almost close to 40 million people are on unemployment, which is, extremely, extremely high. And it's something that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and a lot of, why can't we open? We're losing our business. That's our livelihood. So you got to weigh it both sides. So it's people are looking at their livelihood as that's their life, and I can't open it. You're taking my life, so I need to wear a mask. So there's a lot of different kinds of variations of how we can deal with this later down the road. But we need to join together as communities and countries. I mean, this is a worldwide epidemic, and you see what's going on. I have friends in other countries; they're all wearing masks. They're all doing the same thing we're doing. It's interesting to see this worldwide and not just in the United States. But it's something that it is a new norm. It is how we live our lives now because there's so uncertainty. And we saw something that happened, whether it was blown up or whatever. I mean, it's something that we have to deal with. And people don't realize that 1.5 million people a year die of TB still, and TB is spread almost the same way that this is. It's not in every area, but it's still out there. This is something that has been in the news constantly. This is all that's on the news for the first 20 minutes of any newscast. It's something that's putting a lot of fear in people, and we need to figure out how we navigate through this whole system where everyone feels comfortable and everyone could go back to some semblance of a daily life and live their lives and feel comfortable that they're not going to get sick and die.
I might add to that. I certainly have a lot of regrets about how I handled some of this early on. Like, there are photos of me pretty late in the game, not wearing a mask, and all for good cause. Like, but one thing I've thought about a lot is I had a meeting with an artist, Kim Weston, pretty much just before we shut our office down, and of course we were talking about what was going on, and she said, "Well, I actually have some health conditions. I'm constantly worried when I leave my home about if I'm going to get sick and what that looks like. And that's something I deal with every day." So I think sort of, wearing a mask is probably the least we can do to help protect other people, because we're also going to need to talk about very different ways of being in our public spaces and in our institutions together. Everyone getting tested on a voluntary basis, contact tracing. There's so many pieces to this. Wearing a fabric covering that a local artist sewed for you is pretty much right on track, I think. But again, I really feel strongly, and I think from the perspective of serving customers, if that's one way to use those terms, whatever we can do that creates better access to our institutions for a segment of the population is good, right? That's all good. It ultimately raises all boats. There's a great article the other day called the curb cut effect, right? Which was about, we've cut curbs in all of our sidewalks, which was originally about folks who are in wheelchairs. But we've come to learn over the years that it also helps, parents with strollers and UPS drivers, and ultimately it's a public good. So I think a lot of what we're doing right now is going to become part of the public good. So we ought to, find an amazing mask you like to wear, and figure out within your own organization how you want to handle this, right? What's the conversation you want to have with your staff and your customers about what you're doing to keep them healthy?
Corinne, let me ask you this. One of the challenges I think we all face is that things are not going to get better tomorrow. It's a really long-term situation. How do people deal with that kind of long-term effects? It's not going to get better in August. We may be in this for several more months, a couple of years, we don't know.
No, I think that's a really good question, actually. It's interesting that you're asking that, because right now, and talking to my staff, and I have my own caseload of clients that I work with, and in working with them, we're seeing this gradual shift. So initially, like I said, we were just super concerned with our basic needs. For the most part, that has stabilized now, and now we're looking for our higher order needs to be met. So Dan, that's why the work that you do is crucial, because people are looking for other outlets and other ways to cope with the situation. And so, we moved from the initial phase of just surviving to now, wanting to have our other interests and our other, social needs met. And now we're starting to shift into this new section, this new era where we don't know what's going to happen, right? And we don't have any answers. And so initially, I think everybody went into this and they were like, okay, survive, survive, survive. And then, okay, this is going to be temporary. And now we don't have that light at the end of the tunnel, except that someday we will have the light, but right now we don't have that. And so what we're seeing, pretty uniformly across the board is a little bit of this, a little bit of hopelessness or a little bit of helplessness, because again, it's a very overwhelming situation in which we don't have a whole lot of control. And so when we don't have a whole lot of control, it's very difficult for people to find motivation to do things. The other thing that's been impacted is, our holidays, our celebrations. So this week already, we've been talking a lot about, this last week with people that usually had the big tradition for Memorial Day, and they weren't going to be able to do that. Birthdays are kind of going by, with less celebration, and like Mother's Day went by with less celebration, and Memorial Day. And so, holidays, birthdays, these things are anchors, and it's how we measure time. right? So we may not remember like what we did 3 months ago, but we remember what we did, at like Valentine's Day, or 6 months ago, or 5 months ago. We remember at Christmas or Hanukkah, or, we remember things that way. That's how we anchor time. And with this situation and the social distancing and not being able to celebrate in the way that we are used to celebrating, or that we enjoy celebrating, in the way that we mark occasions, our sense of time is shifting. So one of the things that we focus a lot on is, find new ways to celebrate, new things to look forward to, right? Summertime is coming. We're getting a lot of clients who are feeling a bit despondent because, summertime was always like the kids were going to be out of school. Well, now they've been out of school for months. They were looking forward to going to Disneyland, or they were looking forward to going to the beach, or they were looking forward to, their vacation. And now they don't have that. So now what do they look forward to? So again, we have to find new things to motivate us, new things, and in a creative way, in a different way. We have to shift the way that we think about things and understand that they're not going to be the same, but it doesn't mean that it can't be, better in some ways. This entire situation has been, I think somebody said, it's been devastating. It has. And I said it's a global trauma. It has been devastating. But if you look on the other side of that, the creativity that has sparked, the adjustments that different businesses had to make in order to stay in business, but the way that they offer their service has shifted. And that's created a lot of amazing opportunities and a lot of access to things that people wouldn't have necessarily had access to in the past. So it's about really encouraging people to seek those out and to try it. We have a lot of people. So one of my sites, well, two of my sites, we have a specialized team for the geriatric population. So this is a population who was already, comparatively very isolated, and they're not necessarily the most tech savvy. I mean, I hate to make a generalization like that, but generally speaking, they're not tech savvy. So it's been about collaborating with their supports in order to teach them and to provide the opportunity for them to access technology so that they can decrease their isolation and find these new opportunities and new ways to connect with other people and to connect with their families.
It's a very interesting too. I always feel like throughout this, kind of swayed by the news of the week. 1 week you start seeing good stories about where the vaccine is. You start having a more optimistic feeling about where we're going, or to the opposite. Some weeks it's much more negative. One thing that I've heard from a lot of people, and I'll direct this one towards Peter, is just in the last week, kind of people being done with, tired of being stuck at their house, tired of everything. And I wonder, Peter, if you guys have concerns that translates into more reckless behavior that then ends up at your doorstep in the form of addiction, and just because people are so frustrated with the situation that they don't care as much, or we've seen it definitely in the way that they handle some of the social distancing. People are much more willing to get together now, and I wonder if that translates as well to substance abuse.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a twofold question. One is our patients, are not practicing social distancing anyway. I mean, it's something that, one thing that didn't stop during all of this COVID crisis is that addiction and mental health are still there and have not changed one iota from it. And sometimes it's actually made it a little worse. So you do have people who are saying, I'm sick of being home. I'm sick of doing this. I'm just going to, do my own thing. And that's obviously, some people will be fine and some people are not going to be fine. It's too much uncertainty now, but even staff members, they've had it with being home. So some of them are stuck with kids, and usually they go to work is their relief, and then when they come home, they become the parents that they have to do all day long now. It's not easy, especially if you have multiple young children at home and you're trying to work and you're trying to be a parent. It's not an easy task. So it's causing a lot of anxiety in a lot of people. One of the things in our industry, and I'm sure Corinne could back me up on this, our industry dealing with sick people all the time and mental health issues and substance abuse and all that problems that goes along with it, it weighs very heavily on staff. You know, listening to people's problems all the time and listening to that, you need a relief from that, and you need a relief by, you know, we get wellness counselors to come in and talk to our staff. You know, now it's gone even beyond that. Now they're dealing with, not only dealing with the patient's problems, but they're dealing with their own fears and uncertainties of, you know, am I going to be okay? Is this person I'm talking to going to make me sick? So there's a lot of anxiety going on just within that itself. So we come up and we're trying to be as safe as possible and as responsible as possible. But, you know, again, you're dealing with so much uncertainty that we just don't know what's going to be. And we take every day, a day at a time, and try to better ourselves and try to help our staff, you know, feel at ease and feel like we have their, because they have a lot of concerns, and we want them to realize that, you know, we have their concerns and their best interest at heart whenever we do. And that's something that, you know, you can hear all day long, I want to go back to work, I want to go back to work, but unless it's safe and you could, you know, I can't guarantee that everybody coming back to work is going to be safe, because, you know, there's so many people coming from different places that, you know, they could be infected. You know, we talk about how, you know, we want to open things up and things are going to be better. When this started several months ago, there was patient one, and it spread to all of this, and, you know, over 1 million people in the United States. Now there's 1 million people infected. Now, wait, how does that go? So there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. So, you know, patients, when they come in, they have a lot of fear and anxiety as is. Now to worry about if they're going to get some kind of virus that's going to kill them, because a lot of unfortunate patients have a lot of underlying problems because of their addiction. So, you know, getting COVID could be fatal in their case. So there's a lot of, you know, mental health issues now that you need to deal with that you didn't have to deal with before.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You know, just going back to what you were saying about really how it's affecting the staff, something that I think it took us a little while to kind of become aware of is that, I mean, two things, right? And working remotely, aside from what I already talked about in terms of losing that connectivity that we have. One is that, you know, when this first happened and we all switched to telemedicine, everybody started experiencing symptoms, right? So they started experiencing sore throats, they started experiencing headaches, and so that increased the paranoia and the panic about, do I have the virus? Is something wrong with me? And, you know, the same with our clients, everybody just became more symptomatic. And one of the things that it took us a little while to realize is that the nature of doing, you know, like virtual work means that, you know, we're in an environment that we're maybe, you know, not used to, or like we're in a room where maybe we have a lot of other things going on. Whereas typically, you know, when we're working in an office, we kind of have our office safe environment that's already, you know, equipped and prepared for us to do the work. But also we're projecting our voices a lot more because we're trying to make sure that we're heard by the person that's on the other side of the screen. And so naturally we all started having sore throats because, you know, we found out, oh, it's because I'm projecting my voice all day. So that's why at the end of the day, I have a really sore throat. And that's why, you know, on the weekend when I'm not working remotely, I don't have a sore throat. Okay, so first, I'm not sick, I'm safe. But the other thing that we realized too is that, you know, whether you're a clinician and a therapist, or you're an artist, or you're in IT, or whatever it is that you do, we all have, you know, our environment is really important to the way that we work. And so when something happens at work, you have a physical structure that says, okay, when I'm in my office, this is work stuff. And then when I'm at home, that's home stuff. And so that allows you to compartmentalize in some way. And that, you know, going along with what Peter is saying, is crucial for helpers, right? So for people that are helping other people and are kind of walking into some of the darkest places with them during the day, right? And hearing these stories, and there's a lot of that happens, you know, it's very important to us to be able to have that boundary and to keep that. So, you know, I commute 45 minutes every day to my office. And at first I was like, oh goodness, 45 minutes, how am I going to do that each way? You know, that's a long commute. But soon I came to realize that 45 minutes allowed me time to decompress. So it allowed me time in the morning to kind of prepare myself for my day, By the time I got in the office, I was centered and ready to do what I needed to do. And on the way home, it allowed me to let go whatever it was that happened during the day and decompress and get ready for home life now and everything that comes along with that. And so by the time that I got back, I listened to my audiobook, but or listened to music. By the time that I got back to my home, I had been able to let work go so that I could focus on home. And a lot of people, whether your commute is 45 minutes or whether it's 10 minutes or whether it's 5 minutes, that time is important, as well as the physical, the structural boundary that you have between what your office is and everything that comes with that and what your home is. And we've lost that in many ways. Most people are working remotely at this time. So that means that you don't have that physical boundary anymore. You're in one room and there could be something going on in the room right behind you. You could have your kids there coming in and asking you questions and, or your partner like in the kitchen needing something, or they're trying to work and you're trying to work, and who can look after the kids, and the dog that keeps barking because there's, all these delivery people, because now we're inundated with tons of delivery people. They're delivering everything. And so every single time there goes the dog, and trying to manage all of that, and then not being able to have kind of a safe space where you can just say, okay, I'm going to go and just decompress and kind of pull it together and separate that, right? And leave it where it is. You can't leave it where it is. Where it is in your kitchen, like where it is in your living room, right? So I think just being aware of that and understanding that that is part of what's contributing to kind of that feeling that we have where, in some cases, maybe our home doesn't feel like such a sanctuary anymore. Maybe it does. I mean, in terms of, health-wise, or in terms of quarantining, it's a safe space, but in other ways, it may not be as safe a space as it used to be, as much of a sanctuary as it used to be.
Let me just go to a couple of questions that were in the chat. One, more of a comment, someone who mentioned that they have a child that cannot wear a mask. And so, I think just general comment there, maybe that we all should not judge as quickly as everyone is dealing with different situations in this, and we don't always know the perspective. And Dan, I'll direct this second question to you. Hopefully you'll have a good shot at this. Just how to deal with younger people, because they're dealing with a lot of difficult situations right now. The question here from Charles was about a college student and having to kind of adjust to a much different college atmosphere than what they had expected. But I think across the board, youth and kids are dealing with completely different situations, and a lot of us don't know how to address that.
Yeah, no, it's like he knew I wanted to talk about this. Actually, I mean, for us at the Arts Council specifically, we've been inundated with young people who would like to have internships. Because a lot of the other institutions have not been able to host interns. So we've been trying to host as many interns as we can, so long as we could pay them, or that they're being paid through a program. That's really important to us, that it's not volunteerism. But I also want to, I guess I'm going to lace in another thing here, which is, it's a potential big risk on the overall pipeline for all of our industries, right? Young people, and again, I think particularly people of color, particularly women, are going to be wondering, like, what types of careers can I really have in this time? How important is a career that I can build right now? Because it's going to be challenging. So I do think that if institutions have financial capacity and the human capacity in the organization to take on an intern or to be a mentor and make sure that's a paid opportunity, and if they could be strategic about that, right, to really be thoughtful that, it's not just for the sake of getting some extra work done, but it's for the sake of the industry. A lot of this was brought to my attention by a colleague, Ming Thompson, speaking about women in architecture, right, who are disproportionately underrepresented already, but might be leaving the workforce because they get paid less, because women get paid less, take on more childcare, and then ultimately it doesn't make sense in this next normal for them to stay working versus being at home if school doesn't start in the fall. So this whole rupture could happen in some of our industries. So I think it's vital that we speak to his exact question. We speak to young people about that, but also just bring them in, right? There are ways to bring them in. It's summer. If you invite interns or mentees into your organization, you'll find them.
And just on cue, you had like a ghost child appear behind you, but then like disappeared because of the green
I
screen.
live with them, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, but it's also about work, right? I mean, my kids are much younger, but it's also, there's this tension I feel right now, and it's true in creative sector, especially because a lot of people have dedicated their lives to creativity, less so to like, what their livelihood and economy will be. But that's a tension in what is the purpose of work, and what's the purpose of like, how do you make a living, and how, who has a leg up and who doesn't. So I think young people who've lived through, I can't even name the number of tragedies in this time, this generation, are going to be more equipped than ever to deal with it.
I just like to answer the question exactly what they're asking is a lot of kids, especially students now, are doing online classes, and some of them are, they're thriving through it. It's something to get through, but a lot of them are struggling on it because they need that hands-on attention, and that's something that, especially the super intelligent like to be challenged all the time. A lot of kids and are questioning, like, is this going to go on forever? And we have to, tell them that this is not forever, and that they should continue what they're doing until it does change. So they do have a leg up. You don't want to fall back because you then give in to this virus. You want to continue and build on what you're working on, especially in school. You're going to get a job later down the road. This is going to turn around. This is not our future. This is not forever. You have to have positivity. If you don't, then people are just going to fold their cards now and run away. So, kids in school, I think Charles telling to your son about, look, it's tough right now, but it's not going to be like this forever. Stay in there, hang in there. Things are going to get better. Focus on what your end game is. I mean, if you want to be an engineer, there's a lot of work to be done. You need to always, stay on top of everything. So, be positive. Show, as a parent and as leaders of companies, we have to show positivity. We have to say that things are not going to stay like this forever. Things are going to get better. And if they don't get better, per se, what we're talking about, we'll find a new better. The human race adapts really quickly and really fast. And we do things, you were talking about birthday parties now, and you see on social media how now the new norm for birthday parties is drive-by, and people having a great time. Even though they're 20 feet away from you, it's still, it's being recognized and being acknowledged, and that's what people want to be. So we as human, we adapt, and we're gonna move through this, and we're gonna move forward. And keep your eye on the prize, and your prize is your degree, and your degree is going to get you a good job when you're done. So you got to be positive. You got to show them this. You got to tell them this.
And really encouraging. Yesterday we saw Quinnipiac University came out with their plans to reopen in the fall, and it's going to be some online learning, but they are ready to get going in August if everything remains the way it is. So those plans are starting to come in place to have some level of university back again. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I think one of the key questions that I need to ask before we finish is, at what point should people seek help? When should they? What are the triggers that they should know that they're not just it's not just a mild frustration with the situation, but it's a more serious problem. So, at what point would you say that people should seek out to you?
Well, for people seeking out, mental health counseling or substance use care, a lot of times it's not their decision. It's other people around them who see the changes. When you're living in it and you're living in the situation, you don't always recognize the changes in your personality and things that are going around. But people who are close to you see that, and it's their job to point out and say, look, let's go talk to someone. Let's I see a big change. I see a big difference. Especially with children, you see different behavior, how they're dressing, who they're hanging out with. There's all different signs to do that. On a personal level, when you're not feeling well and it's not getting better, the stigma always has been, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need any mental health counseling. Well, we need to break that wall down and not, have a stigma against that. And that's the biggest thing that we have in our industry has been forever for mental health and substance use disorder is the stigma that something's wrong with you, that you go get that. So we need to break those barriers down and make people feel comfortable that, you know, when they go for help, it's not, you know, that doesn't mean the end of the world for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think that if you're having more bad days than good days, or more bad days than okay days, right? If you're not able to take care of your basic needs, if you're not doing things that you used to enjoy doing, even in this new circumstance, even understanding that there are some things, sure. I mean, if you used to enjoy going to the mall and shopping and now you can't do that, you know, there's a reason for that. But things that you used to enjoy doing at home or doing, you know, for yourself or for others, it's really when you see a difference like that. So certainly our circumstances are, you know, are encouraging us and creating opportunities for us to do things differently, right? But if somebody isn't able to do that, right, and if they're not able to adapt, like Peter was saying, I mean, we are, you know, we are survivors and we do adapt. And if they're not able to adapt in any way and just feel really stuck, the thing about, you know, depression, for example, sometimes it's like a fog, right? You don't realize that you're depressed until you're kind of getting out of it and you start to realize like, oh, that wasn't like my normal, right? There was something else going on. And so it does kind of creep up on you. So yeah, listen to the people around you and if they're noticing a difference in you, but also if you're feeling very, you know, very stuck and out of control, right? Out of control is very different than recognizing that you don't have control over other things. But if you're feeling out of control with your emotions, out of control with your mood, out of control with your drinking, out of control with, you know, anything, right? Even excessive exercising, like all of that is a shift. And so I think people should definitely reach out and just get some support, you know, and have a conversation with somebody.
Great. I want to thank our panel and everyone for joining us this morning. Thank you to Peter Shore, President and CEO of the Retreat Behavioral Health, Daniel Fitzmaurice, Executive Director, Arts Council of Greater New Haven, and Corinne Seville, Clinical Psychologist with Cornell Scott Hill Health Center's Adult Outpatient Behavioral Health. Also to both of our councils this morning that helped put on this programming, our HR Council, presented by Carmody, Sandek, Torrance, and Hennessy, and also to our Nonprofit Resource Council presented by Mosaic. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and we're going to have another webinar tomorrow. We're doing loan forgiveness under the Paycheck Protection Program, and that gets underway at 10 a.m. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us for Councils and Conversation, and have a great day.
Thank you.